be screwed. Feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Issei, Rias Enter Overlord. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of I4MD347H and Zaralann on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Sparkling luster limned the metallic walls, floor, and ceiling of the room, magical lights illuminating the air of the reflecting surfaces while the undead surrounded the priests, their clothes stripped, their weapons robbed, entire attires shorn minus their underwear. Freedom laid so close near them, just behind the wall of unliving monsters that would slaughter them if they surrendered to the biting itch in the muscles of their legs. Their stomachs growled, and throats parched in protest, no food or drink gracing their tongues and throats past their first day. Albeit, could they quench their needs in these squalid conditions? They were prisoners, and no one would come for them, be it the church or the Grigori. The undead would respond to their complaints with their smacking them down. Some of them were praying to the god they betrayed, clasping their hands together in prayer for their lord in desperate hopes for salvation. Some lay on the floor supine, their eyes drained of life, stuck to the ceiling with shattered hopes. Others planned for their escape, furiously racking every fiber of their twisted minds how to overcome the undead while holding onto the thin thread of hope for their freedom. In their lamentation, they finally heard footsteps approaching them, the soft thud of feet resounding through the deafening silence. All of them perked their heads, tired and hungry, as the wall of undead stepped aside to make way for their teenage MSTR. I greet you, gentlemen. I apologize for not taking care of you earlier. I was busy dealing with the misconduct of your former employers. My schedule is a bit occupied nowadays, but I finally made time to deal with you lot. The teenager informed as he stepped towards the defeated prisoners. The group flinched, stunned into silence when he mentioned Rainier and the others. Their superiors had also fallen to the necromancer before them. Whether you're aware or not, you're my first prisoners here. Well, I don't know how to take care of captives, honestly, but why should I care about the rights of criminals in the first place? His voice was condescending, battering the remnants of their pride. Various colors of emotions clashed in their hearts, one failing to overcome the other and vice versa. What's gonna happen to us? One of the priests, unable to withstand the gnawing anxiety, responded. Their fates were inevitable. They knew they were going to die here, for they held no value. They were banished priests, discarded remnants of the church. None of them were of any exceptional value, only to be used and discarded as one saw fit. To the point, I see. If you are wondering why I left you alive, I want you to partake in an experiment of mine. Bluntly put, all of you are basically expendable guinea pigs for my liberal use. I take it you have questions as to what I am planning, but I don't give a DMN about your lives, so why should I see the need to answer? No one answered the boy. The DMN teenager didn't sugarcoat his intentions, directly stating that he was about to torment them in his sick, twisted test. They were at the end of their ropes with no silver lining in sight. However, not all could endure the despairing helplessness drowning them. One of them jumped to his feet and lunged at the necromancer, both hands outstretched with his throat in his sight. The priest grabbed the teenager's throat, crushing his windpipe as strong as he could. Die. Die, die. Crazed at this point, the attacking priest shouted his longing to see the teenager die, sporting a maniacal grin as he poured every fiber of his arm's strength into strangling him and, hopefully, snap his neck. The rest of the priests were torn with mixed feelings. A spark of dark hope swelled within them, an impulse compelling them to join their comrade in killing their warden in hopes of reclaiming their freedom. However, the boy did not care, paying no mind to his strangling situation. With one response, he doused the fires of their hope as he calmly laid his hand on the priest's temple, one covered in a red, scaled gauntlet with a green gem embedded in the forearm. Ah, so we have a volunteer? The teenage necromancer calmly shrugged as if he was not being choked. Control amnesia. After the kid's evocation, His hand radiated with dark energy that was seeping into the priest's skull. The priest let go of the necromancer as he screamed, clutching his head in pain. "Agi!" the priest shouted as the necromancer did something to him. "Let's see what to replace. I've just the thing." The boy hummed, not paying attention to the screaming man in his hand. The man started to thrash in his grip, punching the necromancer with wild swng, even resorting to biting his fingers off just to get him to let go. However, no matter his attempt, the boy did not flinch to his efforts while holding the man like a vice as the rest watched with horror. After he was done, the necromancer released the priest, letting him drop to the floor and curl up as he held his head while his body convulsed. "What year is it now?" the boy asked the man. What you, the man blinked as he picked himself up, his face contorting with confusion for a moment. "Wait, 2138, what am? The sky is black. The rain is clean. Why is it clean? The animals, trees, what you do to me?" The priest shouted at Momonga, his eyes visibly trembling with growing mania. Interesting. I wonder what happens if I replace this." The boy knelt and reached out for the man. No, please, stop. Replace one memory, the rest of it conflicts with the new knowledge, pit against knowledge, natural against foreign. It wasn't as Momonga imagined, as he thought the process would involve less screaming and pleading. He wondered if he could erase his memory of how to scream his lungs out. His gimme stopped screaming. It worked. The man was still trying to scream, judging by how his jaw stretched and the croaking rasp he kept yawning out. But he just couldn't. He at least confirmed that all changes from control amnesia are permanent for now. Continuing. Momonga could not make up a false memory on the spot, so he settled for replacing their general knowledge of the current world with his shitty world, the world of 2138. He tinkered with their broad knowledge first, changing the sky from blue to black, ashen snow falling in winter, acid rain, and everlasting toxic air, while corpses of children littered the streets. What he traded with the man was memories of his world in exchange for knowledge of this one. Even if someone got a hold of this pig's implanted memories, they would find no value or significance in them, in memories of a ruined world that lies beyond the stars unconfirmed. His mana supply was holding steady for now, which was good. He reserved a location for dumping their bodies should they croak after cremating their corpses. The first man Momonga altered was to see what would happen if the knowledge of his world replaced those of the victim. He let the first one go and proceeded to go with the next, ready to remove his capacity to scream. Wait, some of them were running away. The Death Knight stationed here stepped in and smacked them aside with its pavise as the rest of the skeleton warriors picked them up and held them for Momonga. A few of them were bleeding as well. Momonga considered killing one for resurrection and dispose of the rest after healing them. He had more than enough samples to work with, anyways. Moving on to the next victim, Momonga wanted to know what would happen if he erased someone's memories as well as test the effectiveness of his newly acquired skills. Boost. At his utterance, an emerald green glow shrouded him. Momonga could feel the empowerment coursing through his veins and bones. When Momonga grabbed a hold of him, the second victim thrashed like the first, so Momonga paralyzed him with a spell in his hand. He could punch him, but he didn't want his BLD to land on his clothes. He already wasted less than a fourth of his MP replacing that first one's general knowledge of the world. The second priest whimpered for mercy. Momonga didn't as he grabbed his head, beginning to erase all of his memories one by one, starting with his memory of how to scream. The man started to convulse, his eyes losing focus as they stared into space blankly. Momonga started from his recent memories and burrowed his way to the roots. The effects of Boost shortened the time of completion and empowered the strength of his spell. Momonga continued using Boost to double his power, testing the feel of its effect as he washed the man's memories clean. Every time he stacked the skill, he felt it was overclocking his spell to higher limits, wiping his memories faster and more powerfully. He watched as the man started to drool, his semblance of self bleeding dry as time passed. Momonga finished erasing his memories much earlier than expected, in around 5 minutes after stacking Boost in intervals. As a result, the man looked at Momonga, confused for a moment, drool leaking out the corner of his lips. "Da," he uttered with an almost infantile innocence. What do you know about the church? Momonga queried just in case. Ah? You to search? Good, I've reached the natal stage, and I have saved much more MP than I thought. Interesting. Momonga, satisfied with the results, gripped the man's throat. You are free to go. Momonga snapped the man's neck, popping the bone and crushing the windpipe in his palm with ease, as the corpse dangled in his hands. Momonga threw the body, not wanting to touch it any longer. The skeletons made an effort carrying the corpse into another room for storage. The Overlord in charge of that room would freeze the corpse for his resurrection experiment. Momonga checked the watch on his wrist from time to time to make sure he didn't miss dinner. He still had around 30 minutes until dinner time, so he must conclude his experiment as much as he could 10 minutes before then. The prisoners were starting to break down into balls, begging Momonga on their hands and knees to spare their lives. Some of them were making promises to be good from now on, but Momonga didn't care. From what Momonga heard about them from Rainier, they were nothing but losers amongst losers, vile scum that wasted their lives in taboo longing. Gentlemen. Momonga looked down on the pathetic worms. I doubt that there's a life waiting for you outside anyways. If God is as forgiving as they said, then pray to him for mercy. Now, be quiet. I still have time to burn before dinner. Momonga said as he reached for his next guinea pig as the rest filled the room with pleas for mercy. He droned them out as his thoughts wandered to his appointment tomorrow with another of Rias, the one with the twilight healing sacred gear. Momonga wondered what the girl was like, how she looked, and what kind of personality lied inside her. The rising sun of the morn peeked up from the sea within the horizon, banishing the darkness once more in the endless cycle. Many minds slowly aroused from their night-long slumber, rising from their comforting beds in their respective rooms. Languid legs of workers walked in the streets under the vibrant day. One pair of legs, in particular, was lost in thought, his mind somehow barely catching up with his actions. Momonga wasn't exactly sure how this occurred. It wasn't all that noticeable, but something in the air seemed to distract him just enough to lose track of his steps, leading him to almost walking into the target of his search. It was pure luck at work in his bumping into her on his way towards the train station. Blonde hair, bright and almost shining green eyes, nun's dress, and a habit. The girl fitted the description of Asia Argento to the degree that eliminated all room for error. Rainier wasn't all that verbally forthcoming about her intentions after acquiring Twilight Healing, the sacred gear that could heal others like any healing spell, regardless of race or alignment. She, in theory, could restore even an undead to its perfect condition, with only the small limitation being that it could not cure any form of sickness or restore lost limbs, respectively. It was a pale variant compared to the healing spells and skills Momonga encountered throughout Yggdrasil. Yes, having a universal heal on hand was useful, but the point was that it only had one value number, and always delivered the same payload. Momonga wasn't sure if it restored HP in percentages or in piecemeal, but its inflexibility was a glaring flaw. Still, he had no right to judge considering the value of his sacred gear. Otherwise, it would sound condescending. "Are you all right?" he asked as he helped the girl righten herself. "Me?" She looked at him with a visage of expressive concentration. "Me? Good, thank you." "Oh, right, she does not speak Japanese." Momonga honestly forgot about it. That one small detail regarding Rainier's kind. When Momonga questioned the various racial abilities of the races, he discovered the ability of the fallen angel to communicate with any sentient species regardless of language universally. This ability explained how Rainier and her lady friends, all of whom were from Western origins, could verbally interact with Momonga, who was Japanese. The priests Momonga experimented on were polyglots, multilingual candidates picked with Rainier for her task of spying on Issei for Azazel, which later turned into murdering Issei in cold blood. He was DMN sure that coming here did not give him knowledge of Italian, so he would have to do things manually, at least for the time being. He still reeled at Rainier's astoundedly short-sighted plan of taking the girl's sacred gear. In a player's standpoint, why did she want it? No, what value did she see in it? Its only function was to heal the user and the user's targets, nothing more. In a party, a healer was essential, but the profit part of her equation was vague and poorly defined even in the fallen angel's mind. The ability to heal would only elevate Rainier from a mere grunt into a slightly more valuable nurse-grunt hybrid, not much growth there. The creepy part about her wanting Azazel's attention through the sacred gear, with the man being more interested in the item than the user, made Momonga cringe. What kind of girl would have a fantasy of becoming someone's lab rat and pet project? When he bluntly dismantled the girl's plan word for word, she looked at him as if he broke the laws of physics and spat on the corpse of her beloved puppy. He was starting to grow worried over the mental health of these fallen angels and the other biblical races. Back to his problem with Asia, Momonga wondered if Wish Upon a Star could break down the language barrier, albeit casting magic in public was a one-way ticket to disaster. Actually, there was one way he could communicate with her. He still had the translation glasses in his inventory. He stealthily slipped his hand into his pocket, moving his hand through a tear in the space of his inventory until he found his glasses. With his other hand, he created a piece of paper via Create Greater Item with his question already written on it in Japanese. Here. He handed his glasses to Asia and the paper to her. Asia tentatively took the glasses in one hand and the paper in another as she looked at them curiously. Read. Momonga pointed at the glasses and then at the paper, urging her to read through the glasses. All right, Asia slowly but nervously raised the glasses up and looked at the Japanese characters, only to lightly gasp upon seeing the letters rearrange into Italian. Momonga wrote down, "Would you come with me? Rainier sent me to pick you up." He hoped that this would work. "Ah, you, she nodded without question while flashing a sweet, innocent smile. It was so cute that it shone like the summer sun on a cloudless day. Momonga found it super effective. What the hell Rainier failed to mention about her character. She held a pure radiance about her that he could not describe, and this was just his first encounter. Already he had the impression of a genuine holy maiden from her. Just by looking at her, the guilt of tricking the maiden swelled in Momonga like a balloon near full capacity. With a sigh, he took her hand and walked away with her in tow. He hoped that his super tier spell would work and give him the translator's skill. "Can you understand me now?" Momonga asked as he spoke to her, hoping that his wish had been granted. "Why, yes," Asia replied with fluent Japanese, no broken pronunciations of the words this time. Yes, Momonga instinctively pumped his arms into the air. His spell worked to his surprise, living up to its name and infamy. He quickly realized that he let his facade slip for a moment before rapidly coughing into his hand, hoping that she would forget about his blunder. They were in his house in the living room. Luckily, his parents were out and won't be coming back until late at night. Asia seated herself on the couch as she looked around the room with childish curiosity. "Please, I apologize for, My name is Issei, Hyodo Issei. I have brought you here to ask you some questions. Would you kindly answer?" Momonga felt guilty, luring a girl like her into his home like this. Looking at the situation now, he felt like a child predator and a PD flea at the same time. Still, he did it for her own good. He would not break the ice by saying that Rainier was planning to betray her and extract her sacred gear. A foundation of trust was needed to cushion the blow. "May I ask what you're doing here? Where do you usually live?" Momonga took notice of her slightly emaciated state. After capturing the 3 idiots and the batch of guinea pigs, the corpse included, Asia must have survived on the money left behind or something. Momonga hoped he wasn't rushing this. Their conversation did seem forced. "Would you like something to eat?" Momonga offered, deciding to take his time with her. "Why, yes, please." Momonga nodded and decided not to use his magic to give the girl time to adjust. After a few minutes, Momonga returned from the kitchen with a sandwich and a glass of water. He watched as she clasped her hands into a prayer to her god for a moment, thanking him for the bounty, before picking up her sandwich and taking a bite. "How is it? Is it to your taste?" Momonga asked, looking at the sandwich. It brought a nostalgic, yet terrible memory. The sandwich reminded him of his mother's last moment, the symbol of his mother's grim reaper, which stuck to his mind like a searing brand. She nodded with a sweet smile. Only this time, the sandwich brought nourishment and joy from a young nun, still untainted by the cruelties of the world. Momonga could feel his guilt scalding him. How did the idiots even manage to encounter such a rare find? He was dying on the inside, trying to convince himself that he was doing the right thing. Rainier is not here at this moment, but she will arrive after some time. Although I am afraid I am new to this business, so I must ask, what do you do in your line of work? Momonga asked, slipping his tongue a little, wondering if she would answer. You, After a brief hesitation, she answered. Although her version of Rainier and her story was pure, she thought that she was doing the work of God and was helping someone who saved her in her time of need. She actually painted Rainier, the same racist angel with a twisted perception of values and goals, as her savior. Momonga cannot believe it. No wonder why Rainier managed to trap her in her service. She's just too DMN pure. He couldn't handle such innocence. His heart and soul can't stand against her. Oh, I see, he smiled awkwardly. It was ironic. While Momonga wouldn't bat an eye in killing his prisoners, fallen angels included, or slay a dragon if necessary, he couldn't stand against the presence of a super pure maiden. Well, do you have any goals in life? Anything you want? Momonga's lips were already twitching, like a crooked branch at the verge of snapping in its struggling to hold the treehouse. He could barely muster the strength even to maintain his act. Asia giggled, thinking it was just his unique quirk. It only widened the dangerous crack on his mask. Well, she smiles. Momonga mentally begged her to stop smiling like that, and it wasn't healthy for his mental fortitude. I just want to have friends and be happy with those I love. Momonga could not swallow her answer easily without dying. The fact that he couldn't discern an iota of deception only worsened his guilt. I see. Momonga struggled to keep it together. He must not give in to the holy light before him. Who do you consider as a friend, for example? Asia smiled. I don't know. This is the first time I've spoken with someone like this. Just talking with you already makes me happy. If he weren't convinced that she was a maiden, he would have accused her of bullshit. He had a terrible experience dealing with those that said those same lines before in his world, and they scarred his faith in humanity as a result. But by just being near her, Momonga could almost feel his scarred spirit healing. He felt the same thing he thought he had lost long before, even if it was just a vestige. Hope? Does that mean that I'm your friend? Momonga hesitantly asked, afraid that her answer would finish him off. Asia nodded in response. If you would accept someone like me. He couldn't do it. He dropped to his hands and knees. He couldn't do it. He couldn't tell Asia that Rainier was planning to sacrifice her just to get her sacred gear. He couldn't destroy the faith of a little girl like this. Issei? Asia looked at the strange, but funny brown-haired boy as he looked up from his position. Do you have a place to stay? Momonga asked, straining the words out of his mouth. She shook her head. Of course, she didn't. The guilt was bursting through the dam at this point. This might seem like a dumb question, but Momonga slowly confessed. If Rainier were to betray you just to have something from you, would you hate her? He wanted to know. He must know the extent of her purity. He must learn the limits of how pure one could be. Asia tilted her head. She tapped the bottom of her chin as Momonga waited for her answer. Well, I don't know. But I think that she would probably want something from me. Want? You wouldn't hate her? Momonga hung his jaw, baffled. I would be sad. But no, I don't think I would hate her. I believe she needs it for a good reason. He gave up. He hung his head, defeated. He could not win against the innocence of a pure maiden. Asia was the worst matchup no one could conjure. She dealt more damage to him than any evil he encountered in this world, just like how any of the divine magic caster class would apply to his game avatar. She's a monster. Momonga wasn't used to this, and his mind could not handle the sheer purity he witnessed. She was a monster forged of innocence. There was something in the air that made the former guild leader feel as if he was out of place whenever the girl's eyes met his. He could tell that it wasn't exactly something that was a threat, but instead something that he was merely unfamiliar with. Being a middle-aged man in the body of a lick in which a teenage boy housed under his skin was a very abstract situation, so there was no question that he was a very abnormal presence in this world. His mind went over all the possible solutions to the situation. He could lie or keep silent and claim ignorance, therefore hiding the whole affair under the rug. On the one hand, he would not have to be the one to solve the resulted awkwardness between the three fallen and this girl. He was pretty sure that if she were ever introduced into Yggdrasil, she would either create a massive following, perhaps a religion, or get eaten alive. Momonga wasn't sure which would be scarier. With a massive weight on his chest, the former guild leader told Asia Argento everything. And that is everything, Momonga confessed. Half of everything. He omitted his true identity, the lick and the man behind the lick, and the nature of his powers as the caution he accrued from his Yggdrasil days refused it. He did not have enough confidence to let the truth slip yet freely, not when he still much to learn how he arrived here in this strange, broken reality, a very, very broken reality, one that bordered the realm of actual bullshit. Asia sat there trying to take in everything that Momonga revealed. There was another long, awkward pause between them before Asia broke the silence. "Thank you." Tears were running down her cheeks from her eyes, glistening as it dribbled down her chin. "You're the first boy who shared his kindness to me after everything." Oh, CRP. Momonga watched as Asia started sniffling in light sobs. Did he make her cry? Did he offend her with his half-confession? Wait, don't cry. Was it something I said? Momonga watched as Asia's sobs slowly died down. Asia asked, her smile now bearing a sad radiance. "What should I do?" "I don't have anyone else. I am alone." From her words, Momonga then understood. Asia was coping with the fact that she was alone, probably hurting more than ever after hearing Rainier's betrayal from his lips. The purest girl Momonga had ever met was in dire need of support. What could he offer her? Not even he, a scarred survivor of a doomed, ruined world, was heartless to leave a kind, innocent girl to fend for herself in a world like this. No, he refused to allow her to become like him, to become an empty shell of her former self under the overwhelming weight of reality. "Do you want to join me instead? To stay under my roof?" Momonga offered. Asia looked up, her breath held in with bewilderment. "Why you would? But I have almost nothing to repay you." "Just your smile is more than enough." In truth, it really was. Seeing her happy was soothing to his beaten soul. Hell, Perocino would throw tens of thousands of yen just to have her live under his roof. His other guildmates would offer the same if given a chance. "Please, I insist. In fact, I'm confident that my parents would be more than happy to support my choice to care for a girl in trouble. And, as you learned, I am more than capable of providing your basic needs." Now Momonga must figure out a way of sending her to school. She must have an education. He knew from his own experience as a poor child in a world ruined by the pollution of greed. Maybe if he begged strong enough, he could convince his parents to send Asia to Kuo Academy. But they might need funds. Perhaps he could sell some stuff he had in his inventory. His items were memories, mementos of his golden years in the game. But, as of this moment, he could not forgive himself if he let a girl in need suffer, while he still had the chance to save her. Besides, his guildmates would approve using them for her sake. Now he just needs to find a buyer for all of the gold coins he had and convert them to yen somehow. Maybe he could use Rainier to help him with that and test out her mind-wipe powers if it comes down to it. When Momonga returned to reality from his thoughts, he saw Asia looking back at him as her tears started to flow like rivers. Her smile was more elated than before, her happiness leaking out with her words. "I would love to." Momonga smiled before he felt a sudden rush of knowledge. His smile creased before he started to look at her, seeing something akin to a green bar lying overhead, a blue bar. Wasn't that supposed to represent the HP and MP bar of Yggdrasil? A Yggdrasil icon is floating above her head. Why was there a Yggdrasil icon above her head? This world wasn't Yggdrasil. This was Earth from centuries past. Asia was looking at him strangely. Is something wrong? There were so many that he could not label them without risk of error. Just, something I forgot popped up. Momonga awkwardly smiled. "Anyways, Asia, I welcome you aboard. Please, I shall do my best to prepare a room for you. But let me give you a tour of my humble abode, and tell you about my plan to convince my parents to accept you." When he recalled Rainier and the other two, he forgot that he had to feed them. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am sorry for allowing myself in before you." The priests blinked. The necromancer teleported into their room, or makeshift prison cell at this point, without notice. From the entrance, undead skeletons, including the knights donned in violent black, carried in more priests, the ones that were either mental vegetables or corpses. The demon in human skin reduced more than half of their numbers in a single day. He continued experimenting on them, one-on-one, each casualty hauled off to who knows where outside their isolated world. It was the first time they saw them, the organs of one of the corpses dangling out while another was missing the head. As they expected, the ones that left didn't return unscathed. Babbling mumbles and slurs droned the air from the ones still alive. One thing they knew about the teenager with absolute certainty. The boy was a monster, the devil. There was no way that person was human. He worked on experimenting them like guinea pigs all night without batting an eyelash, then disappeared to live his life up there, ignoring their needs as they rot in their rooms like corpses. Not a single one of them had the strength to voice their concerns, too hungry or thirsty, deprived of power. The undead tossed their damaged comrades and the corpses of their fellow priests next to them as the undead left the room one by one. They did not react to the smell of BLD, or the mind-warped babbles of the broken ones. Our time together was brief, infinitesimal. However, from that time, I have learned much from you, gentlemen, and your contributions are appreciated, I assure you. However, after today, circumstances have arisen and complicated your stay here, so I must bid you all goodbye from this world. Momonga aimed his hand at the emaciated priests, dead and alive. May you burn in the pits of hell for eternity. Greater Fireball. From his palm, he fired a vast sphere of flame, brilliant red and white 4 times his height in diameter, as it burned across the air and splashed into torrents of infernal streams. Momonga uttered just before the wave of fire swallowed him and briefly furnished the entire room with his hyper-buffed flames. When Momonga reviewed his skill menu, he encountered the additional racial levels belonging to those of dragons. He didn't even know that dragons had racial levels in the first place. The racial levels belonged to that of a fire dragon, but he underestimated just how powerful the racial buffs were. Momonga knew that there was something seriously wrong with this world the moment his exp-related skills, super-tier magic included, were fueled by mana and his summons attaining absolute permanence. The laws of this world were a little too loose for his liking. His newly acquired dragon classes boosted his fire-related spells to the point where even his 7th tier spell could perform like a mini-nuke. At this point, Momonga was confident that he could solo a world enemy in a PvP and come out as the victor regardless of the consequences. Momonga blinked in the blinding white flames, unconcerned by the scalding heat. Luckily, Momonga received a new racial immunity to fire from said dragon classes coupled with the protection of his main equipment. The main gear was on him, just not on his current person. As the flames died down, Momonga looked down, finding his clothes unscathed by the inferno. He wondered how the heck did his clothes not burn while the rest of the room was melting from the heat, especially his shoes, which sunk under the molten marsh to the ankles. The room of liquefied metal glowed in polychromatic colors, burning bright and brilliant, the ceiling dripping droplets of hot, gleaming sludge and landing on Momonga's hair, his clothes, and lava-filled floor. Suffice to say, the result was currently overkill, especially when disposing of his prisoners. Momonga just wanted to dispose of the skeletons in his closet, irony and pun not included. He did not wish Asia to see his morbid projects when he introduces this place to her. His projects would traumatize the pure saint, and because of this, Momonga would have to abandon his dark experiments. Probably for good. Momonga sighed as he inspected the damage. It was time to wish the room back to normal and replenish the undead lost in this aftermath, and maybe clean up the room. There wasn't a speck of dust left after incinerating the prisoners at least. Looking back at the exit, Momonga saw the entrance half melted, seeing that the flames did not stop in this room. Walking out, feeling his shoes trudging through the molten sludge of the melted floor, he checked the halls and saw the aftermath. The splash zone spilled out of the room and licked the hallways out the exit as well, destroying even the undead stationed outside. Now that he saw it, Momonga did recall that he lost his connection with the undead outside, including the Death Knights, a moment after the flames splashed him and leaked to the hallways. The fire stretched out far, reaching beyond even the corners of each of the 2 ends of the hall. He hoped the flames reached the house basement and attracted unwanted attention. Note to self, reserve fire element spells as last resorts, Momonga muttered. He wondered if the flames reached the fallen angels in their rooms. No, Momonga did not feel his connections to the undead stationed near their room receiving any damage. He was lucky he didn't enhance the range with the widened meta magic at the very least. Anyways, it was time for him to fix the underground lair and return to Asia. But first, Momonga had a few words for the idiot trio. He also needed to feed them to his surprise. Apparently, the three races of the biblical factions could not live without sustenance, food, sleep, drink, every need a human needed. They are definitely not the same races Momonga knew back in Yggdrasil. Greater undead patrolled the halls, eyeball corpses looking out for any assassins or thieves, while pale riders phased through the earth unobstructed by the material world. The power of wish upon a star was indeed a miraculous wonder, generating an underground world sliced from the erased world of Yggdrasil. How air came in the dungeon was a mystery, despite there being no ventilation, as if the dungeon was continuously refreshing the oxygen in piecemeal for the living residents. The roof was self-supporting, nary a single sign of potential collapse. Inside their large room, laden with furniture, clothes, beds, the three angels sat on their sizable queen-sized bed, that which their warden made out of impossible magics. They were slowly processing their new way of life after feeling a magical disturbance in the halls followed by a heat wave, all of which vanished afterward by a stronger wave of magic that removed the heat as if it were never there. What are we going to do?" Midult asked as she gazed at the enormous shambling mass of horror that was the Death Knight standing by the only exit alongside. What others would describe as an elder lich, but more ancient. I don't want to die." Rainier released a snort that came out more bitter than anything else. "What can we do?" She looked down at herself as if trying to decide if this was really her or not. "We're fully at his mercy, and I'm not even sure if we three can get away fast enough before someone or something skewers us." The bitter part of her also reminded her that her only advantage, probably her feminine shape and superior beauty, won't do anything right now as the teen's excessive energy was absent. It was kind of sad that, in her murdering him, she granted him the key to attaining power, so much power that he made all three of them feel small. Even worse was that with a loss of his memories, he stopped being predictable. It was as if his whole personality suddenly was rewritten into something much more solid. Mature. She had no proper word for it. "What did you awaken?" Calawarner asked, wanting to know what happened to him. "What did you do to give him this?" She pointed at the lich adorned in robes of immaculate ebony with gold lining the rims. "Nothing," snarled the black-haired fallen angel. "If piercing his gut with a light spear was enough for someone to gain all of this, then I'm pretty sure we would have been swarmed long ago. I did what I wanted and then just flew away." He was bleeding all over the ground and as close to the other side as anyone with a fist-sized hole in their gut could be. Do you think this is part of his sacred gear?" Midult asked with a gulp as she tried to recall some of Lord Azazel's long rants about all those that were already known. "I mean, if he can do all this in just a couple of days after his meeting with you, I'm not making sense, am I?" Midult's muttering made the other two prisoners look at her. "I don't think so. Lord Azazel said his sacred gear had a very noticeable tint of a dragon at least. Unless it is a dragon necromancer, which is absurd." Rainier huffed. There was no case of dragons dabbling in necromancy as far as they knew. Not that any even would have if they could, there was no point, nor was it a true art of life and death despite the popular belief of humans. Rainier wasn't exactly savvy herself and, despite her very long life, wasn't very knowledgeable about the magic of animating dead flesh. The dark art was only popular for the crude make of cannon fodder, at least that was how she viewed it. Even the gods governing the domain of death were averse to learning it, mostly because their methods were cleaner, safer, and much more efficient. Necromancy was the magic humans founded, the art of resurrecting corpses, not life. But the ones before their eyes, their undead guards shattered their knowledge of how necromancy worked. From what they could garner, they were sure the teen did not kill over a dozen innocents and slay some unknown giants. The undead in the room were too old, like he raided an ancient cemetery from the times of the Great War. But that wasn't precisely how Rainier saw all this. Whatever magic was at work, it created these things, without the need for corpses. Even a monkey could tell that their appearances were too similar, too much of the same make to be from different bodies. Interrupting their moment, a tear in space-time opened up before them. The three knew who was arriving. Emerging from the void was their captor, Issei, as his gaze lit over their forms without any longing for their bodies. I am sorry for the delay. Issei raised his right hand, which held a bag containing food, ones picked up from restaurants. I believe it is time for dinner. Are any of you hungry? The three fallen angels looked at each other. Every time they saw Issei arriving here, they either expected him to enforce his dirty longing upon them or outright killing them. It was a feeling well earned since they were sure that he made a sect dungeon or something at least. Middle raised her hand, her stomach grumbling a little. That still did not excuse the awkwardness of the atmosphere. Splendid. Issei then waved his hand as a large, rectangular table carved from onyx and polished stone appeared, followed by 4 chairs for them, each holding a cushion for their comfort. Please, help yourselves. I've managed to procure them before the restaurant closed. Issei urged as he started removing the food from the bags, bringing out sushi, rice, and other consumable miscellanea for the girls. Momonga watched as the 3 fallen angels took the food he provided, seeing their faces making expressions as if they expected something worse. It was within expectations as Momonga never bothered to feed the priests before he disposed of them. Although, in this case, they looked at the food on the table, hesitant to take his offerings. He could see the consequences of his excess impact on them exteriorizing RSNG regret for resorting to such lengths in his first attempt of intimidation. That was a lot of impulsive thinking on my part, but it's unavoidable. I am not exactly used to this, so this is a head start. At least I could use this for future references. It was pure dumb luck that these 3 barely had enough prowess between all 3 factions to be noticed at all. Even the most basic monsters back in Yggdrasil could endanger them, even the ones with weaknesses against their holy attacks. Suffice to say, Momonga overestimated his opposition, the ones partially responsible for his dilemma representing one of the lowest tiers of them all. Underestimating his foes was a path Momonga would never cross no matter what, such as the player-killer way, a lesson he learned from his golden days learning the game. Paranoia was a companion in Yggdrasil since death lurked around every corner when one least expected it. One should never abandon it lest they lose their highest prized items, or else, one example being the former owners of the world item, depiction of nature and society. However, the mistake of overestimating his foes was a novel experience for Momonga, a luxury that was almost impossible in Yggdrasil. He lived in a world of the top, where hardcore players strive to improve themselves to the limit in a virtual world that would punish the casual ilk. For example, finding a max-level player without protection against instant death or time spells. Momonga usually dabbled against the pinnacle of players, the best of the best in PvP or PvE, where he must struggle to learn and decipher the skills and strengths of his foes even with his limited divination magics, and he thrived in such a harsh environment. These 3? He could read them like an open book, with spells or no spells. There was nothing they could hide from them. Momonga read them page by page, from start to finish, grasping the gestalt of their characters inside and out by picking their secrets clean. Still, his abusing their level differences almost made him feel like a racist anti-heteromorph human player, the kind that PKs first-time players for fun. Their sad faces reminded him of his beginnings when the human players peeked at him until Touch Me rescued him, which only fueled his guilt even further. Well, it's a bit too late to backtrack anyway. They slowly take their knives and forks, ignoring the chopsticks beside them, a preference of utensils imprinted into them from their time in the West as they were not Japanese. The silence in the air was thicker than glue, congealing. Momonga rested his arms on the edge of the table and broke the awkward silence. I have met your recent recruit. I must ask, where did you find her? He could see all 3 of them stiffening but pressed on without showing any reaction. He folded his arms and tried to project a calm and nonchalant presence, the 2 undead stationed in the room leaving the premise to give the girls peace of mind. You picked up a priceless gem. When I heard about Asia, I didn't imagine her to be that pure. I thought you were reserving that crucifix for someone more, deserving of such a gruesome fate if your lackeys gave any indication. The sacred gear-removing crucifix currently sat in a room far in the northern corner of the dungeon, stashed alongside the loot he stripped from the priests. It was temporary until he could find an excellent way to secure his loot, a way to layer his ideal securities. The 3 angels gulped, the nervous tension making their hands shake their utensils. Probably not a good idea to bring Asia up, but I can't help it. What the hell are they thinking? Momonga wasn't sure how to view these three. For all he knew, their little scavenging of a sacred gear of low value was less than a footnote. But the funny thing, when I asked how she would respond if I revealed your hideous plan, Rainier, do you know how she answered? Momonga asked as he slowly placed his hands on the table. I never thought that such a pure soul could exist. She is, in every way, too good for you or this world. Even after I confessed to her about your true intentions, she had never given in to the temptation of hate, which is a miracle in itself. If I were in her shoes, I would have slaughtered you all in an instant if the situation wasn't so complex. But that is not my right to abuse. Because of that, for her sake, I've decided to not hold your sins against you. But she is no longer in your service henceforth. Do I make myself clear on this? The three fallen angels stared at Momonga for a moment, swallowed the lump in their throats, and nodded frantically at his statement. Good. Now that we got that out of the way, shall we move to another topic? Momonga asked, gesturing to Rainier for an answer. What drove you to commit such atrocities in the first place, Rainier? From murdering me without considerable logic and betraying such an innocent girl. They had struck rock bottom in their endeavors, trapped and fearful for their lives. Momonga had little room to work with, considering the impact of his intimidation had wrought nothing but awkward moments after cowing them to SBMSN. Ruthlessness and calculated wasn't the key to connect with these hopeless idiots, but he needed to connect with them to establish a ground to communicate with. Rainier could only muster that much from her current emotional state. Momonga turned to the other two, seeing them veering their head away to avoid eye contact. As I stated before, I will not hold your past transgressions against you. I can understand what you're all feeling, the feeling of guilt gnawing away your insides and the anxiety it wrought. He should have worded it better. The way that the three were now looking at him was rather uncomfortable. But there is no point in keeping silent about it. Think of it as your personal time to confess. I don't have the robe or work history in my resume, but I can be a good listener, even better than some priests out there. They loosened their muscles to a slight degree. His words had some assuring effect, but not to the extent he wanted. I'm not very good at lowering the tension, am I? His brain needed a filter to sieve the excess factor. Momonga honestly couldn't help himself as he was pulling most of his words out of nowhere as he went along. Rainier was the first to speak, with the expression of someone being led towards a guillotine. Her mouth shut with a click before she could continue. Yes, Momonga leaned forward a little. Go on, it's not polite to leave your partner hanging. Rainier looked away, not wanting to speak out anymore. I have ways of extracting information from you and remove your compliance from the equation. This is your only opportunity to gain my trust. Momonga urged as she reluctantly reforged eye contact. Love, recognition, power. Rainier muttered the fuel for her extreme deeds. Momonga hummed as he pulled back, leaning on his chair. Is that all? Would you really move far with the power you speak of? Recognition cannot be taken, only earned after all. Besides, being at the forefront of your peers also carries burdens as well. Have you ever thought about what you would do afterward with the sacred gear of your preference? Most of all, how do you even define love? Is it blind devotion and worship you seek? Or is it something more meaningful? Momonga asked, wanting to see how she will live her life. Her answer would confirm everything he learned thus far. Rainier could not answer as she looked at her plate dejected, eyes losing their light of motivation as reality reared its ugly head in her line of sight. So it would seem that even eternal beings could not understand themselves when forced to reflect. Momonga took note of her mindset as a basis for his library, the study of a fallen angel's mentality. He might wonder if her MSTR also shared the same delusions despite his years of experience. Did the rest of her race share this mental illness? Do the angels and devils suffer from it as well? While he was more than aware that humans are by no means infallible, seeing creatures with such underdeveloped intellect despite their immortal lifespans called their worth into question. Actually, if they are unchanging throughout millennia, would this include their mental growth as well? Immortality was a controversial subject. If one was immortal, then they must remain constant not only physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. Otherwise, they might not be able to handle the changing times. Momonga did recall how he lost track of time when studying in his room for the information on this world. He was lucky that he could bullshit his parents when they caught him pulling an all-nighter by saying that he runs on coffee to explain his lack of lethargy. However, that was no excuse not to learn and improve themselves over the years. In short, Momonga would categorize the three as plebeian casuals. I see that you won't know unless you travel down this road. Momonga nodded to himself. I will leave you girls for the night. Please, take your time thinking about your lives. After all, unlike me, you have until the end of time to make a choice. Momonga rose from his seat as he turned around and walked away. Oh, and prepare a well-constructed apology for Asia before I bring her here. At least try to make up for your past sins. You already owe your victims more than your souls could amount to, but that doesn't mean you should give up on repaying it. My parents will soon return home from their alone time outside, so it's a matter of time before I introduce her to the family. Gate. After uttering that phrase, the same black rift stretched before Momonga. Through it, he returned to his room, yawning a little as he seated himself on his desk. He still had some time to study for the test tomorrow so that he would make the best of his undead traits. Momonga needed to prepare Asia for a healthy life sooner or later. Hello. I am happy to meet you. My name is Asia Argento, and I hope I am in your care. Asia introduced herself to Mr. and Mrs. Hyudu in the living room, staring at the two parents with eyes of untainted light emerald. Momonga stood behind Asia, one hand resting on her shoulder with an awkward smile stretching his lips as he followed up after her introduction. Mother, father, I don't know how to say this properly, but long story short, I met her by accident in the streets when I was taking a stroll. We talked and stuff, and I have decided that maybe we can let her stay here. Momonga tapped Asia's shoulder to cue her signature attack, her radiant smile and a hint of puppy dog eyes. It was a bit dirty exploiting Asia's main features, but he refused to let this plan fail and resort to using control amnesia on them. Although, the response of Issei's parents surprised him. Oh, Issei, of course we will. The mother lunged for Asia and hugged her like a teddy bear, rubbing her face into Asia's hair very fervently. Please call me Aka-san from now on, okay? Momonga blinked. What the hell was she talking about? Looking at Asia, a tinge of red spreading across her cheeks. Oh ho ho. I didn't know you had it in you, but sure, anything for the good of the family. The father said something Momonga could not understand. Ha, Momonga contorted his stolen face. What the hell were they talking about? Did they accept Asia as their own? Their cryptic choice of words concerned him. Oh, and call me father from now on. What the hell was he speaking? Did they return home drunk? So, you're all right with her staying here? Momonga asked. He still could not completely understand their custom lingo. They were also unique in their own way, one of them treating Asia like a beloved toy. Hoo-hoo, isn't that obvious, son? The mother smiled. Her Cheshire tone did not agree with Momonga's concerns. All Momonga received was that they were accepting of Asia and Asia was playing along. Looking at Asia, he saw her looking uncomfortable at Issei's parents, her gem emerald eyes darting left and right, casting glances between Momonga and the planks of the floor. Well, then, may I show her around the house? He asked, still affected by the awkwardness. Momonga should move this along and introduce Asia to his secret base since she was aware of the supernatural world. He briefed Asia of a glimpse of his power and to verbally prepare her mind for the horror roaming his private dungeon, which housed 3 living prisoners, all of which were female. If Parasino were here, he would call Momonga out for creating a sect dungeon. Momonga banished that thought. He did not want to imagine what would happen if someone called his underground base a sect dungeon. Oh, showing a girl around the house already? Did something good happen between you two? The father asked with a heartwarming smile. There was one mystery that popped up regarding Asia, but that was not the topic he wished to divulge. No, Momonga denied. The married couple narrowed their eyes into teasing slits. What was with their behavior? Momonga could not understand them. Oh, okay. We'll leave you two alone, so have fun showing her around the house, Tilda. The mother playfully waved her hand as if bidding them goodbye. Momonga just silently took Asia's hand and led her upstairs, not wanting to withstand more of their strange behavior. Once they were outside their earshot, Momonga audibly sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose with his free hand. Well, I hope my parents didn't make you feel uncomfortable. It's the first time I saw them like this. At least Momonga hoped that it was the first time. He wasn't sure if they were like this all the time when Issei was still alive. Looking back, he saw Asia smiling in response. She didn't seem bothered by the unusual nature of Issei's parents. She shook her head. I don't mind, Issei. I think your parents are very nice. Very nice. Well, that's one way to put it. Momonga labeled them as needlessly optimistic instead. They were good parents, though just very estranged. However, he still failed to learn their first names during their time together. I think they're very energetic, in my opinion. What about you? What are your parents like? Momonga asked. Asia looked downcast, her smile still there. I don't know. I wish I could remember what my parents looked like. Oh, SHT Momonga touched a landmine. He learned only the surface knowledge, how the fallen angels came to pick her up after the church exiled her. According to Rainier, Asia touched a taboo during her time as a saint, which led to the church banishing her. She healed a devil that came to her for aid in the church. After meeting Asia, Momonga started to understand why she did it. Her inner values wouldn't let her ignore a cry for assistance if she could help it, making her like touch me in a sense. I see, Momonga forced a smile, a very shaky smile. What is it like in the church? I'm not a religious person myself, so I am curious. Momonga was suspicious of the story. However, why did a devil come to the church in the first place? He learned that devils couldn't get near holy sites or symbols of God, something he had yet to confirm. Devils would usually stay away from any places of the church like a human to pollution in his original world. It isn't as exciting as it seemed. Asia shook her head. I stayed inside the church after they took me in. Momonga hummed in thought. Was it because you had a sacred gear? The relics, crafted by the biblical god himself, were of unspeakable value. The church would need to be filled with idiots if they didn't search and collect sacred gear users around the planet. Actually, they might recruit him if he wasn't partially undead. He could see a possible disagreement between him and the angels in the distant future. Asia slowly nodded. Momonga probably shouldn't have asked that. Having a power that can heal devils could be seen as heresy, but I don't regret having this power. At least, from this, I can help anyone in need. Momonga stopped and stared at her. Why the hell must God make someone this pure? Momonga nearly fell to his knees and felt a critical hit to his soul. She was his natural enemy, and he cannot fight against her even if he had the power of God in his fingertips. I see. Momonga's crooked smile returned once more. How did a sweet girl like you end up with Rainier, anyways? Momonga already knew, but he wanted to learn of her backstory from her mouth, not Rainier's. Besides, he wanted to learn more about the devil that led to her exile. Didn't Rainier-sama tell you? Asia asked. Drop the sama. She is no longer your superior. And yes, she did, but I want to hear it from your lips, Momonga replied. A silent pause held Asia's lips, the soundless air deafening to the two. Asia looked at Momonga, eye to eye, and took in a deep breath before she answered. After introducing Asia to his secret underground base, Momonga helped her digest the presence of the undead he summoned and the three idiots. Asia was somewhat terrified at first, but she slowly adapted to the minions of undeath quickly with his help. Momonga thought it would take a few days, not a few hours, though. She was a strong girl behind the kind exterior. As for her reaction to the three idiots, she kindly thanked them for their time together. It was one of the most touching scenes he witnessed in real life, almost forcing him to forgive the three idiots for the reticence emphasis on almost. As for Asia's future, Momonga considered begging Issei's parents to apply her for QO Academy or something, although he might need to confirm the amount of devil presence in the school and their stance against those like Asia. Asia followed the enemy of devils, so he must be wary of them. The only alternative was to either apply her for online classes or apply her to another school in this town. However, he quickly delayed that endeavor when Asia discovered the leftover eroges the previous soul stockpiled during their tour of the household. He made another mental note to scry his room squeaky clean of impure elements. Just how much did Issei worship PRN? Momonga felt like he was in another Paracino in an alternate universe. He hoped that the body's former occupant didn't leave things to haunt him. The day after, in the early Sunday afternoon under the bright blue sky, Momonga led her out to the In Touch shopping district, where the girl needed clothes in her size. After all, unlike the three idiots, Asia couldn't make her own clothes. Momonga could make them, but he needed her measurements first. He did make some first attempts, albeit unsuccessful since his lack of sense for female fashion was horrendous. Besides, his parents gave him ample allowance when he requested it for Asia's clothes, and generous amount. Momonga wondered why. "Have you ever shopped before?" Momonga asked, holding Asia's hand as he led her through the crowd under the afternoon sun. He would suspect that she never shopped since her profession wouldn't allow material attachments. And no. She sheepishly shook her head, shining her iconic smile once again. It scalded his soul with maximum effect no matter how many times Momonga saw it. How could someone like her exist? Momonga found a gem he could never find back in his world. He would do his best to preserve it from the taint of this reality. Ha ha ha, well, this is my first time shopping for clothes with a girl, too. Please, inform me if any of the garments suit your fancy. Momonga smiled as they stopped before a glass window holding various dresses ranging from vermilion to immaculate frilled white. Take your pick, Asia, Momonga urged. Smiling, he watched Asia peruse the items behind the translucent glass with fidgeting indecision. Momonga almost felt like a father taking his daughter to a mall for the first time. He kind of regretted it since it made him sound old in his head, though. Still, he was glad that he could right some wrongs of the world around them. However, as he waited for Asia, a man approached them by the side. Momonga stole a glance at the character and summarized his visage. He was a gentle-looking, handsome young man with dark blue hair. His eyes were shut or squinted, but Momonga could glimpse the amber gold color behind his eyelids. Shrouding his form was a cape, sickly pale, on which fur tufts of white lined around his neck. Underneath the shroud, Momonga found a black suit lined with gold, perpendicular lines crossing each other with each line and a foot separate from each other. Momonga tilted his head as his caution was already inflamed the moment he met it. The man did not speak a word, but he slightly opened his eyes as his gentle smile contorted with wicked mocking. He already cast life essence and mana essence in succession with silent magic. Like the three idiots, this one didn't protect himself from divination magic. The stranger was not human as far as he knew. Asia. Momonga turned to the girl. A problem seemed to have arisen at the moment. Would you care to follow me? HN? Asia turned to Momonga, only to cup her mouth with her free hand as she nodded in understanding. Momonga was glad that he briefed her on escape protocols should any dangerous elements pop up. She already had the magic ring containing the greater teleportation on her finger ready. Momonga led her out of the mall and into the first alleyway around the corner. He could tell that the man behind her was following him like a dog that found a bone. Using Yggdrasil statistics, Momonga averaged the man around level 45 or less. He didn't expect to encounter anyone at this level so soon. The question was, is the man a fallen angel or a demon? The moment they disappeared from the stranger's sight, Momonga looked at Asia as she instantly cast the spell and vanished in a blink of light, no longer there. Just in time, too, when the man already appeared behind him. Momonga stole a glance behind him once more, seeing the man's closed eyes open out of surprise. "Ah, I'm sorry for being a bother, but can you spare a moment of your time?" the man asked, his eyes closed swiftly to hide his amber eyes, his face a mask of pleasant serenity that made Momonga's stomach turn for reasons he could not explain. "The young lady that was with you before, with blonde hair and green eyes, Asia Argento, where can I find her?" "Perhaps. But firstly, do I know you?" Momonga asked, his stance relaxed and face almost criminally confused. "I'm sure I would have remembered someone dressed so aristocratically." He had already prepared his greater teleportation, time stop, true death, and other emergency spells just in case. The refusal made the teen chuckle a little, which cemented the value of playing the role of a simpleton bystander to Momonga. "No, I do not believe we ever crossed paths." The man shook his head as his lips quirked into a seemingly disarming smile. "But I do know Asia. We met some time ago, and I could not simply pass by and not to greet a very familiar face. She did a great service for me, and I only wanted to repay her, nothing more and nothing less." "Ah, I see." Momonga gave the green-haired teen a smile of his own that showed too many teeth and scratched the back of his head. "Oh, where are my manners? My name is Issei, nice to meet ya. It's good to hear that there are people around that want to help Asia, as she seemed to be rather lonely after some jerks kicked her out of her home." So the man was a devil. This might prove a rare opportunity for him to test his mid-tier spells against such a foe. If this would turn into a hostile confrontation, then he'll be more than ready to unload some of his more potent ones, but still within the boundaries of the capabilities of this person. Momonga was no fool. There was no way he'll trust someone with such a blatantly fake smile. "It's nice to meet you, Hyodo-sen." The man's slightly open eyes seemed to glow slightly, but Momonga felt nary a response or affliction. "You can call me Lord Deodora Asterath. I'm not from around here, and I'm sorry for being a bit pushy, but my time here is short, so would you kindly show me where Asia-chan is right now?" Is he serious? Momonga wasn't precisely aware of how the higher classes of the Devil Society interact with the common folk, but such blatant disregard was highly offensive. He wasn't even sure if this was an intended goal or just poorly chosen wording. It all depended on the intentions of the teen before him. "Sorry, no can do," he answered sheepishly with the most realistic, apologetic expression he could forge. "She went to rent herself an apartment, but I have no clue where the addresses those which she and her consultant will look over are. I didn't even know there were so many of those around here." The last part was literally placed there as an afterthought. Momonga was straining his acting prowess to the highest gear, using his experience during his beginnings as a salaryman to work when he was looking for a place to stay. "Oh, is that so?" Deodora's face gained a small frown, and his slightly open eyes gave out a slight glow once more, this time a bit stronger and more noticeable for Momonga's sharp gaze. "Well, that just won't do, as I cannot leave this matter unattended after finally finding her. It would be just unsightly for me to not repay her with everything I can." Yeah, no, this screamed attempted kidnapping no matter how he saw this. Momonga could tell that the teen was expecting something to happen. Did this pompous devil actually think that the former guild MSTR would pull Asia out of his freaking pocket or something on the spot out of empathy? The whole conversation was off from the start, and it seemed like Deodora was only partially paying attention to the conversation they were having. Was Deodora looking down on him? No, he shouldn't be that dumb. "I'm sorry, nothing I can do can help you with that." Momonga gave out an apologetic shrug. "She doesn't even have a mobile phone, so I have no way to reach her, and I don't know the number of the agency she was working with here." If he wasn't on guard, Momonga surely would have been surprised when his mana essence caught an anomaly within Deodora. He was aware that some mechanics of his spells and skills were altered in this strange and bizarre world. Some lines were almost close to what Momonga knew. What he didn't expect was that the teen suddenly gained a second mana bar. Yeah, Momonga confirmed it upon closer inspection. It was somehow hiding behind the primary one and supplementing it. This left Momonga confused. Was there some item that allowed the owner to draw mana from it? If so, then it should be an incredibly potent one by the sheer magnitude of the source alone, easily dwarfing the primary mana of the teen several times over. The air suddenly shifted, as if it transitioned from one mood swing to another. Momonga delivered no indication of noticing, at least on the without, while within, he shifted his choice of spells to take into account the newly revealed anomaly, the unknown factor. "Ah, I see," Deodora spoke as if he was tasting the words, rolling them around his mouth. "And you are helping her with it?" "Yeah, when we met, she looked so lost and in need of help. Well, I did, and we became friends when I helped her find her way around the town." Momonga now felt as if a gun was poised at his head. After all, isn't it just common sense to help someone in need? There was a moment of silence before the teen in front of him shifted slightly, his disarming smile widening until it bore an almost predatory sheen to it. Momonga wasn't sure if it was either something he said or did. It seemed to irk the man much, but his irritation did not leak out his friendly facade visually. "Indeed, I very much agree with that." A tone of amusement followed words, seemingly from Deodora's observation of Momonga. "But wouldn't that make you a bad friend right now? If you don't know where she is and cannot point anyone in her direction, then how would she know if she missed someone important?" Won't it make sense that you will be a bad friend for preventing her from meeting someone who just wants to repay her for the kindness for whom she showed some time ago? Oh, now you've crossed the line. Deodora's logical fallacy sparked growing rage inside Momonga, one that nearly cost him his composure, and showed how much flawed and twisted his grasp of friendship was in actuality. So this was the same devil that Asia saved, the same devil that got her kicked out from the church, and the one that set her down a dark road to a terrible fate should Momonga not confront Rainier. I knew something was wrong with Asia's story. This prick actually went through all that just to get to Asia. Momonga slid his hand behind him, hiding his clenched fist to stifle the fury inside him before his emotion suppression killed it. However, his anger continued to flare, working his skill to the limit as he resumed playing along with this badly written play. Well, when you put it like that. Momonga faked a flinch and a saddened expression. Yeah, it will make sense, but it's not like I can do anything about it. There was a sudden shift in the air and a visible flare of mana. The teenage aristocrat cast his spell without a single chant, so fast that Momonga wondered if he could perform the silent metamagic as well. Shock took hold of Momonga's mien, like replacing the mask on his face, and deceived the noble devil once the light green magical circle radiantly blossomed under the former player's feet. His body felt as if a very thin layer of film was suddenly pressing on it from all directions. Such a tragedy. Asia-chan would probably be rather disappointed for her friend to be gone, but you don't need to worry. Deodora's eyes were now open even wider as a malicious tint infested his smile. Such a bad friend like you simply do not deserve such a gift like Asia. She will understand it when I'll make sure to explain everything to her. She will need comfort, direction, a shoulder to cry on, and even someone to explain things to her about how she can survive in this new world on the other side of Church's wall, if you think about it. The teen's face took a thoughtful expression, with his eyes being closed as if he entered deep ponderance. Momonga stared at him, confused. What was he doing? His spell wasn't inflicting any form of damage upon him, so why wasn't he suspicious of his spell's ineffectiveness? Was he? You may even redeem yourself. All you need to do is to disappear. The pressure grew, compiling on Momonga, but he barely registered the increase of force. The feeling was strange, but he could tell that the gestalt of his immunities was shielding him from the information flowing in his mind. Well, if he was finally showing their hands. Well, it's kind of sad that this charade will have to end. Momonga's face shifted from the fake shock into boredom, as if taking off his mask. It was fun while it lasted. He gave Deodora a second to respond, his right hand delivering a solid backhand to the green-haired teen's right cheek faster than the pain could register. Gah! The magical circle shattered like glass from Momonga, actually putting up some resistance to it. Of all of the many options you could have taken to gain Asia's location, instead of earning her trust and have her come to you, you picked something so cheap and yawn-worthy that I cannot help but cringe upon imagining the reasons within your train of thought. Momonga started slowly walking towards the teen that by now spat some BLD out and even a whole tooth. I was wondering why you didn't even notice my lack of response to your spell, but to think you're this stupid. It explains why you also decided to embark on the cliché route of a comforting friend, using probably her first real friend as an expendable piece. I mean, falling in love with your savior isn't exactly as unexpected as many would assume. An inverted Florence Nightingale effect is a thing. Momonga recalled a popular series in the West where there was a villain that made his doctor undergo the same process in a sense, but not like this. This BSTRD was attempting a more convoluted and wrecked version of it. Something that would earn him a one-way ticket to the deepest layer of hell. Deodora seemed to finally recover from the shock of being hit in the face and turned towards Momonga while still on the ground, shooting an almost bestial snarl at Momonga. How dare you? But he was cut short. Paralysis. Momonga didn't bother letting him speak, already pointing his palm at the young-looking devil and cut his rant short. Sorry, but it's my turn to take the verbal lead. He made a note that whatever that secondary source of power Deodora was carrying around seemed not actually to protect him from his spell. Empowerment only, maybe? Probably works more on offensive power, perhaps, along with the substantial mana boost. Let me tell you about myself. I'm usually quite tolerant, but a person can change if they've lost their memories after surviving an attempted murder. However, things got worse once that person found his murderers and interrogated the truth out of them. And that truth turns out to be something so stupid, I cannot help but laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. After meeting a certain girl that my murderers recruited recently, I have come to terms with my morals and values with her help. And I am afraid that what you did falls onto the line where I cannot let you live without suffering for what you've done. It was a pity that even lying prone on the ground, the teen still could talk. Paralysis wasn't a potent spell, allowing some minor functionality of the target. What have you done to me? There was a hiss as if the teen was trying to spit venom as Momonga. For all the former player knew, the devil could do so, and the only thing stopping him was the spell. You cannot, Gah. Momonga delivered another backhand and slapped his other cheek, already sick of his voice, leaving another red mark on his pale face. Unfortunately, while you're lying down on the floor like a helpless slug, you seem to have forgotten the importance of etiquette. You missed the important detail that I was still talking and how rude it is to interrupt someone when they are on a roll, you know. Momonga lazily reached out and grasped Deodora's head and turned it to look right into his amber eyes. As I was saying, while I still have my train of thought, let us return to your plan to whisk Asia away. Looking at you, I can already see the motivations behind your exiling Asia with your meddling. I am very, very livid right now. You see? You cannot imagine how much I'm holding myself back from popping your skull like a grape. Still, I can imagine the ugly reasons why you want someone so pure to the point of getting her exiled after seeing your gaudily decorated attempt at murdering me. From that, I have more than enough reason to treat you like the little piece of SHT you are. You lowly worm, I will, GHHH. Deodora's words were once more cut short when Momonga's fingers started to dig into his scalp. Not to the point of drawing BLD, but dangerously close to it. Filthy plebeian. And that's another thing. If you just walked away and continued to look for her on your own, I would have let you go. You should have kept your mouth shut when you're doing the deed as the saying goes, the mouth is the source of disaster, and it gave me excess reasons to kill you. Momonga gave his target a mockingly helpless expression. Not only that, you managed to dig your grave down even further, which is a feat in itself, by trying to turn me into a martyr for your cause of obtaining Asia's affection and trust. Something that looks to me you did not just once or twice. Is Asia even your first attempt? There's no way that someone like you could pull off that setup without prior experience. Get your hands, this time. Momonga crashed Deodora's face into the asphalt, strong. Wah. The crunch was very satisfying, and when he pulled the teen's head back up, he saw BLD streaming from his nose, which was now twisted, broken, and deformed beyond repair. How long it will take for him to recover from it, he mused absently. Now, let me see if I get it right because I'm flying blind here. You were so sure that it was the most efficient way to go that you didn't even try any other one. You probably didn't even have any other plan tucked somewhere in your tacky robe. Am I getting colder or hotter with this? Momonga didn't let him reply and continued with a thoughtful expression and a slightly mocking tone of voice. And that actually begs the question. Why would you be so dedicated to finding and gaining the trust of some nun when your little stunt caused the church to throw her out? And don't even start on how obvious that it all was a setup. The whole scenario sounded and looked so rehashed that I couldn't tell if you were even there half of the conversation. Momonga punctuated his disbelief with how poorly the act was by once more smashing Deodora's face into the ground, the crunch this time being less defined, but still there. Erg. There was a minimum of pain as he pulled the young devil up. Now, why would you bother going through all this? Oh, let me think. The only thing devils do with humans is turning them into pseudo-devils via these things you have, evil pieces. Momonga was merely grasping at conjecture, but the picture he was painting was not without a grain of truth. Which reminds me, if I would check through your pockets, would I find an evil piece? One that you intended for Asia Argento? You really don't have to answer that now. We can see for ourselves with a reveal. His free hand was moving before Deodora had any chance to react, darting forwards and into an inner pocket of his tacky coat. After a few seconds of rummaging, his fingers wrapped around a small solid object before pulling back, a red bishop glinting slightly under sunlight with luster. Jif tha ba, Deodora tried to speak through his broken teeth, but failed. All appraisal magic item. Well, what do we have here? Momonga gained a small smug smirk as he turned the evil piece in his hand, right in front of Deodora's face. Whoever made these trinkets is truly a genius, so much potential in such a small container. Even if I find the purpose somewhat disturbing and unfit for such a magnificent invention, I cannot fault him for it. Desperate times are always the root of desperate measures. Can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, and all that comes with it. I could even call his cause noble if not for the fact that others, like you, are vitiating his righteous intentions. Greater break item. And then, before the wide eyes of the young devil, his evil piece crumbled into dust, and it vanished into nothing. There was no fanfare, no great show of power, just something that was made to last crumbling away, not with a bang but with a whimper. Ah! The green-haired teen looked at a loss of words, frozen even. And the culmination of his efforts and aspirations is now dust because of the runt from the noble clan he once hailed. Momonga's smile grew wider, almost cheeky, after placing much emphasis on the word once. Isn't that ironic? With the hand that was holding onto Deodora's skull, Momonga cast the one spell that would bring the most damage to the devil, one to his spirit more than his flesh. Energy drain. Gah ha ha, Deodora screamed through the BLD that was still flowing from his face, something that nobody would notice nor hear as the strange barrier that the same young devil placed around the area right before trying to kill Momonga was now preventing him from being seen. Wah! His body was twitching as if trying to overcome the effect of paralysis, but his strength was slipping. Deodora was becoming weaker and weaker under the sensation of might withering into a lifeless husk. But we really strayed off topic there, didn't we? Momonga moved Deodora's head a bit close to his own and looked him right in the eyes. What you just heard is me venting all of my grievances I had with your little stunt. When I met Asia, I was taken aback by her innocence, a level of purity that is too good for this world. When I heard about you from her lips, I thought something was strange. Like, why the hell did a devil even bother coming to the church in the first place? A place that all devils would stay away in most circumstances, considering that the location is a literal death sentence for beings like you. Now, after meeting you so early on, I cannot express the amount of rage I have after knowing that there was actually a BSTRD so sick and low targeting someone like her from the start. Something I cannot forgive even if God up there told me to grant you amnesty. The proverbial pendulum of this? It finished its swing when I asked what she wanted in this world. She told me that all she wanted was friends, people to be with her. I've committed myself to be a friend for her, her family, and I will live up to that role for God I'm sure. What better way to start other than this? Momonga let his eyes glow crimson red as prolonging the waste of life's suffering to make him feel the full weight of his actions and the consequences carried with it. So, I thank you for the opportunity to meet a great friend such as Asia, and as a show of my gratitude, I will let you experience every little bit of it till the very end. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author I4MD347H and Zaralann on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.